Hey investor friends, I'm Michelle Markey and I hope you're having a great summer so far. Today I'd like to catch us up on the latest equity holdings because the 13F filings for Superinvestors came out in mid-August 2023 for the quarter ending June 2023. So today I'll cover some of my favorite super investors like Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, Mohnish Pabrai, Spier, Li Lu, and a few other super investors I keep tabs on like Greg Alexander, Bill Miller, and Michael Burry. And with that, if you also enjoy learning about super investors' investing activities, please be sure to like and subscribe to my video and YouTube channel because I believe by studying some of the best investors, that will also have an effect on us to become better investors. So with that, let's get into some of the latest stock holdings. Starting out with the best investor of all time, Warren Buffett of Berkshire Hathaway's portfolio, we can see that Berkshire held relatively steady in the number of stocks it continues to own. Right now, 48 stocks, and the portfolio was valued at $348 billion at the end of June 2023. And with that, that's up about $23 billion from the first quarter this year. So it's up a little bit, like 7%. So that's not bad considering they're dealing with a massive portfolio. And what I also noticed was they did $1.4 billion of share repurchases, and they did $4.4 billion of share repurchases in the first quarter. So they did less buybacks, but had a total of $5.8 billion worth of buybacks so far this year. And also, they seem to be swelling in their cash pile of $148 billion as of the recent earnings figure, and that was reported in early August. And that's up about $18 billion from the first quarter when they had about $130 billion of cash. So it kind of feels like Buffett is waiting for a big buying opportunity in the stock market. For some reason, whether they keep just getting a bunch of dividends from some of their oil and gas stocks or some of their favorites like Coke and American Express, it seems that Buffett may not know exactly what the best way to allocate all that cash is other than to take advantage of, let's say, treasury bonds, because they could be earning a comfortable 5 or almost 6% on some of those compared to risking it in the stock market. And maybe they're just enjoying this fixed income return for what it's worth, like many of us who like to save. Like I'm definitely taking advantage of high yield 5% savings rates where I can get it. So I wouldn't be surprised if Buffett is doing the same, considering he's kind of swishing around a ton more money than most of us retail investors. So maybe he's just waiting to buy back into more stocks when they become on sale, because looking at their current equity activities, it looks like they were less active in the second quarter compared to the first quarter in terms of buying and selling. And among some of the specific holdings that they changed up, it looks like Berkshire added to their Capital One holding, and they also added to their Occidental Petroleum holding, but they actually sold off some Chevron. So he still seems overall bullish on oil and gas, but maybe just wants to kind of balance things out and maybe increase more of a good thing in Oxy. And then an interesting buy is that Berkshire bought 3 home builders in DR Horton, NVR, and Lennar Corp. So I don't know much about some of these home builders, except that I know that Buffett is super bullish on the wholly owned subsidiary Clayton Homes. So maybe in spite of rising interest rates, there's still a lot of housing demand, and maybe a lot of these home builders just can't keep up with trying to provide the necessary supply to a lot of housing demand that remains out there. So maybe they're seeing something, and maybe these are some of the actions of some of the investing lieutenants, Todd and Ted. It might not be Buffett himself who could be making these moves into a lot of home building activities. So some of the other things I noticed is that they reduced in Celanese, General Motors, Globe Life, and Activision Blizzard. Not sure why they decided to cash out of that. Maybe they figured their gains in ATVI are as good as it's going to get, because maybe Microsoft will seal the deal, so they're happy with whatever gains they had and are happy to reallocate those funds. And I don't know all that much about the following, but they entirely sold out of McKesson, a medical distribution company, and Marsh & McLennan, a risk and strategy company, and Vitesse Energy. So among those entities that they just sold, it's interesting to try to see if you can find any patterns between the stocks they're reducing on and the few that they're buying. So I'll keep some of that in mind. Maybe I'll research home builders and see what the fuss is all about and what the prospects could look like if the economy were to slow down as inflation gets more under control based on the Fed continuing to hike interest rates. And we'll just have to see kind of what shakes out in housing. But for now, this seems somewhat of a bullish sign that housing will not be completely crippled no matter how high the interest rates may go. And a little touch on Charlie Munger's Daily Journal Corporation. It seems that no news is good news because DJ.co neither bought nor sold any stocks, including Alibaba, which they keep holding on to. And so that kind of does it for both what Buffett and Munger may be up to in the second quarter this year. And then moving on to Mohnish Pabrai's portfolio, it looks like his American stock portfolio is pretty low right now at only having $73 million invested. And keep in mind, his overall holdings should be at least $750 million. And that figure is a little dated from many quarters ago when I looked at some of his assets under management according to what's publicly available in American filings. But that may not even be scratching the surface of all of his international holdings. And one of my friends and I joked recently that maybe he's a billionaire by now, given his investment in the Turkish logistics company Reysas. So who knows, that stock seems to be skyrocketing to the moon lately. And maybe Mohnish finally achieved all his hopes and dreams as an investor through that holding. Who knows? But as far as what his American 13F filings show recently, it seems that he's turned bearish on some of the former stocks he was pretty interested in, like Micron Technology, and he sold out of that entirely, as well as also Brookfield Corporation, which he had only entered in the third quarter of 2022 and already completely sold out of both BN and BAM ticker symbols. So it's interesting that he didn't decide to stay with that holding very long. And also he sold entirely out of Seritage growth properties. So it just goes to show we shouldn't blindly copy these super investors into some holdings, because just when you think they might be holding on to something long-term, maybe they only want to turn around their investments and maybe have a 2 to 3 bagger, which means to have increased your investment by 2 to 3 times and then reallocate those funds like Mohnish seems to be doing. So his portfolio is very interesting in this turnover. And then with Guy Spier, it looks like Guy Spier hasn't really done anything since 2022 when he sold out of Twitter. So Guy Spier is taking a page out of Charlie Munger's book and just holding steady. And he seems to be investing for the long term and being pretty content to do that. And then finally with Li Lu, it seems like he's also taking a page out of Mohnish's book and entirely selling out of Micron and just adding to his East-West Bancorp holdings. So with all of these guys, there's not so much going on as far as we can tell. And it seems like there's still much that they're waiting for maybe in American stocks for them to make a move on those. So we'll just have to see if anything interesting happens that makes these super investors in particular want to invest in American stocks some more in the future. And for the last super investors I'd like to touch on for today, with Greg Alexander, I noticed a very bullish inclination toward automotive or car related stocks. Like, he's already got a substantial and #1 holding in Stellantis with ticker STLA, which was formerly known as Fiat Chrysler and Peugeot when they merged into this. And that stock seemed to have been in the doldrums for the last few years and recently has been ticking back up toward the high teens in terms of dollars. Like at the time I'm recording this, STLA was trading at around $18 a share, which is kind of reminiscent of what Fiat Chrysler or FCAU used to trade at. Like it was kind of also in the doldrums, kind of leading up to the pandemic and thereafter. So it's kind of interesting to try to figure out what does Greg Alexander see in Stellantis. And he's also added to his lithium motors with ticker LAD. And that's interesting because I also talked about lithium motors with my friend Alejandro in a recent video that you can feel free to check out. And also in the Greg Alexander portfolio, he added to another automotive related stock. So it'll be interesting to see where some of these car stocks go. So if you're interested, feel free to check that out. And then with Bill Miller, he finally threw in the towel with Alibaba and having completely sold out of Baba in the second quarter. And maybe in lieu of that, he was maybe influenced by some others to buy into Stellantis. So we see him buying both Stellantis and Lithium Motors. So that's an interesting development, as well as Michael Burry also buying into Stellantis. So notice a car theme going on here. I think that's kind of interesting if you're into cars. And then also Michael Burry seems to have exploded in his equity holdings. So I think it's also of note to try to figure out what kind of maybe strategies he's trying to employ here, because sometimes he has almost no holdings and other times he has a bunch, and he still seems to be bullish on his Geo stock, which is a private prison kind of holding. So with all of that, feel free to pick and choose some of these stocks that may be of interest to you that you may want to do some more research on and see if you agree or not with some of these super investors. Are there any stocks that you feel are especially interesting and you're wondering why these super investors invested in them? Please let me know in the comments what you think. I'd love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this video or learned something, please like and subscribe. And I wish you well on your journey to being the best investor you can be. Till next time.